So we're standing in Tel Dan, which is the northern part of Israel, and this was the place where the tribe of Dan settled. They were initially given the area near Jaffa, but because they could not drive out the Canaanites, they ended up coming here and taking over. Well, earlier we read about Abraham going up towards Dan to rescue his nephew who was taken captive. So it was a name that maybe later on someone came and made sure people knew where this place was where Abraham and Lot were. Abraham went to rescue his nephew. But this was a place where Jeroboam also built an altar to keep people from going south to Jerusalem to worship. And for that, God punished them. When the Assyrians came, this is probably the first place where they began destroying and then sending people into captivity, never to come back, the northern tribes. This is Tel Dan.
One of my favorite places to visit in Israel, some of you have gone with me, is this place called Tel Dan. Tel simply means a hill. Dan is the name of this place. It is located in the Hula Valley in northern part of Israel, north part of Galilee, if you know your history or geography of the Bible. It is beautiful, beautiful country, right on the foothills of Mount Hermon. And so as the snow melts, the water comes down and becomes the Dan River, that one of the streams or the tributaries that kind of flow into the Jordan River, going all the way through the Sea of Galilee and then keeps on going. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. And to the east are the Golan Heights. I'm sure you've seen some of that in the past year with all that's happening in Israel. And then to the west of this Tel Dan is the Lebanese border, just 2 or 3 miles away. So this place right now is not the best place to be, but it's a beautiful, beautiful part of Israel. Unfortunately, as we will see in today's message, this place also became the site of a heinous sin. A sin where God's people hired a priest, a false priest, who led them in false worship. A terrible thing happened here, and it had terrible consequences in their lives, but also in the end of times, as we will see in today's message. This was also the place where they set up a golden calf. We know about the golden calf in the wilderness, but this was also a place where they set up a golden calf, and God dealt with them. This morning's message is titled Hired Gun. To keep our Western imagery going, hired gun, to symbolize how these people hired somebody to do their dirty work. If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Judges, chapter 17 and verse 5. And you have the Bibles in front of you in the pews. They're for there to be used. If you would turn in those pew Bibles to page 398, 399. Judges 17 and Judges 18, you will find them there. Pages 398 and 399. What we're going to hear in today's message is how, unlike the previous judges who were types of Christ, we're going to meet people now who were the false types of Christ. This judge we're going to see today, he's not really a judge, he's just a pretender. And we're going to learn more about how God does not share his worship with another. Anything else is false worship, and he will have no part in it. The moment you say God and something, he has no part in it. It's not Jesus plus something, it's Jesus is the way, is the truth, is the life. Judges chapter 17, listen to verse 5. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and household idols. and he consecrated one of his sons. He consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. Verse 6, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now, so far in our series through the book of Judges, we have seen how the judges were the good guys. We learned that contrary to popular opinion, Ehud, Barak, Samson, Deborah, all these were types of Christ. Means they'd lived their lives in a certain way, that there was a pattern. They wanted us to recognize the pattern, and Jesus fulfilled the pattern. But now we come to a shift in the book. No longer are these characters a type of Christ. To the contrary, we would say they are the false types of Christ. And the reason we know there is a shift is even in the text, we notice something different. We notice a new line. We read that line in Judges 17 and verse 6. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That statement is not found in the first 16 chapters. Now we find it again and again in the remaining 5 chapters in Judges 18:1. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Judges 19:1, and it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. And then the final verse, the final statement of the book of Judges, Judges 21:25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. You see, previously the refrain means a statement that is repeated. The refrain was, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. The first 16 chapters, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. God had told them, go into the land, possess the land, drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, and all these people. Their time is up. You see, the Canaanites hadn't done anything to the people of Israel. It was not a personal thing, but they had done something against God. What God was telling the people of Israel is, do this for me. You are my instruments of holiness and righteousness. I gave them time. Their time is up. Drive them out. And for a while they were like, but they haven't done anything wrong to us. It's not about you. It's about me. This is my land. I gave it to them. The land is soaked in blood. The land is soaked in sexual immorality. Everything vile is there. Their time is up. It's your time, but drive them out. And they didn't listen. And what happened when they did not listen? Well, God sent those same nations against them. And they cried out to God and said, oh God, rescue us. Oh God, help us. And then God would send a deliverer. God would send a judge. And names like Ehud and Barak and Deborah and Samson, these were those judges who came and they fought against those people and set the people free. And then for a while, the people would follow God and they would be very pious. And then little by little, they would go back to their old ways. And then God would turn up the heat again. And this would go on and on. It was a cycle. Something else very important. In all that was happening, God was setting up the tribe of Judah to take the lead. In fact, the very first verse in Judges chapter 1, verse 1 is this. Now, after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, who shall be first to go up for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? Who's going to go first? Who is the leader? And what is God's answer? Judges 1:2, and the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Indeed, I have delivered the land into his hand. Why Judah? Because one day the kings will come from the tribe of Judah, King David. Because one day Jesus, the son of David, will come, God's anointed king. And so, as this cycle of sin and then trouble and then repentance and then deliverer and then everything is okay, as this is going on, God is setting up this one tribe of Judah to take the lead. But unfortunately, God's people are not listening. They were doing their own thing. In a sense, they were trying to usurp. You know what the word usurp means? They were trying to sabotage God's plan to send his kings and then the king to the line of Judah. You know, the book of Judges is a beautiful book. The more I have studied it, I've studied it in the past, but recently for this series, it has layers and layers of deep meaning. When you break down this book, when you look at the outline of this book, there are two introductions, then the content, and then two conclusions. Go home and read it. There are two introductions, then the content of all these different judges and the vicious cycles of sin, and then in the end, there are two conclusions. The first conclusion is Judges 17 and 18, and the second conclusion is Judges 19 through 21. The first conclusion is against the people of the north. These people to the north who were setting up a false idol, they were building a shrine. They were trying to usurp the true worship way down in Jerusalem. And this morning, we're going to see how that worked out. It was the tribe of Dan. This tribe, way to the north, they were not supposed to be in the north. Somehow they snaked their way to the north. But this tribe of Dan was doing all they could to usurp God's plan of sending his king through Judah. And they were doing that by setting up false worship. The second conclusion, Judges 19 through 21, is about people in the south. It was the tribe of Benjamin. They were also up to no good. They were trying to usurp the tribe of Judah. You know, God said it's through Judah. Judah is the one. Judah should be the leader. And the tribe of Benjamin wanted to be the leader. Who was the first king of Israel? It wasn't David. Who was it? Saul. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. So the conclusions to the book of Judges is, in a sense, one is to deal with this debauchery to the north, and one is to deal with the debauchery to the south. One was about false worship, and the other one was about the false king. This morning, we're going to focus on the false worship side. What is happening here? As I mentioned to you, this tribe of Dan, God did not tell them to go north. They were supposed to be in the south. God had given them this land to the southwest, somewhere between the people of Judah and the Philistines. This was their land. Instead of taking the land, guess what these people did? They're like, we're not going to do what God told us to do. We're going to try to move north. And they began to snake their way to the hill country. And then finally, they began to make their way to the north. By the way, there was only one person in this tribe who went south. Only one person. Do you remember who that person was? Only one person who was from the tribe of Dan who made his way to the south. We just studied him for the past 3 weeks. This is how you need to listen carefully. It was Samson. That's why it didn't make sense. Why does Samson keep going to Gaza? It's like he was just a sexually charged person who just wanted to go to Gaza and have sexual intercourse. That's not true. He was going because that's where the tribe of Dan was supposed to be. So everybody's moving to the north except for this one person who's making his way to the south. By the way, there's an application there. Don't always go with the crowd. Sometimes you feel like, hey, everybody's going that way. We should also. No, sometimes God wants you to go against the crowd. The tribe of Dan, they all are moving to the north where God did not send them except for Samson, who is making his way down to Gaza all the time. And ultimately, he died in the process. In fact, he was also betrayed by them. So for now, God was done with his people. No more judges. No more deliverers. Now we're going to be in a transitional phase between judges and kings. So in this transitional phase, the tribe of Dan decided to take it to another level. And this was another level in the sense where we're not just going to worship idols, we're going to do a whole different kind of syncretistic worship. You know what syncretism is? It doesn't say there is no God. It's not atheism. Syncretism is we're going to worship God, but we're going to also worship other things. What's wrong with the gods of the Canaanites? What's wrong with the gods of the Amorites? Why don't we worship Yahweh, but also bring these other gods? That's even worse than atheism. The moment you and I begin to have Jesus in, it would be better if we just said, we don't believe. But when we say we want God and also these things, that's where God begins to deal with us. In America right now, we have this kind of a faith. There are people sitting here who have this kind of faith. It is Christ and my family, Christ and my job, Christ and my business, Christ and my goals. Nothing wrong with having those things, but they need to be in the proper place, whereas God is God. He needs to have the top place in your life. He will not share his worship with anything or anyone else. And the moment you begin to put things there, even your spouse, love your spouse, but the moment you put your spouse on the same level as God, if you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, he's going to put you through trials to the point that you will realize, no, that is not God. No, he is not God. No, she is not God. If you love your children, wonderful. But the moment you make it God and my children, he will make your children despicable to you. They will do things that will break your heart. I'm talking about if you know Jesus Christ. If you don't, you may have a great time, but ultimately you're all going to destruction. If you make your wealth your business, it will come to a point where you will despise the fact that you have that business. Your hobby, the moment it begins to take the same place as God, I hope you're getting what I'm saying here today. God will not share his honor, his glory with anything or anyone else. He wants your heart first and foremost totally submitted to him. How many of you heard of C.S. Lewis? In his book, The Great Divorce, he says it this way. He said, having allowed oneself to drift. It's not like one day we get up and say, you know what? I'm going to worship God and my family. I'm going to worship God and money. No, we don't do that. Nobody does that way. It's never that drastic. But it happens like this, he says, having allowed oneself to drift, unresisting, unpraying, accepting every half-conscious solicitation from our desires, we reached a point where we no longer believed the faith. Here's the faith in the living, true, triune God. Here's the faith where Jesus Christ is your life. And here's where we start drifting. And we make this the faith. Lewis goes on to say, Just in the same way, a jealous man, drifting and unresisting, reaches a point at which he believes lies about his best friend. You don't start out saying, you know what? I'm jealous of my best friend. No, we slowly, just inch by inch, we start becoming jealous. A drunkard reaches a point at which, for the moment, he actually believes that another glass will do him no harm. The beliefs are sincere in the sense that they do occur as psychological events in the man's mind. If that's what you mean by sincerity, they are sincere. I would never say that those people over here who have God and something else are not sincere. They are very sincere, but they are sincerely wrong. What the Danites were doing, they were very sincere, but they were sincerely wrong. And Lewis finishes that by saying, but errors which are sincere in that sense are not innocent. You may believe in your heart, oh, I love my family. I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this for us. You may be sincere, but you're still not innocent before God because now you have built up an idol. You have put people and things and even self at a place where God says only one can survive. With that understanding, let's begin. Listen to Judges chapter 17, verse 1. How does this work out? How do the Danites, this tribe, create this syncretistic worship? Well, Judges 17, verse 1, there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Micah is a shortened form of Mikayehu. Mikayehu means who is like Yahweh. Well, that's a great name. In fact, there's a prophet in the Bible named Micah. This is not the same guy. God the incomparable, that's what his name. And he comes to his mother in verse 2, Judges 17:2. He says, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here is the silver with me. I took it. Apparently, this young man named Micah stole 1,100 shekels. By the way, 1,100 shekels is a lot of money. You're talking about millions and millions of dollars. Apparently, this was a rich family. This lady was very wealthy. And her son, Micah, stole a big amount of money from his mother. Now, I'm not going to fuss at him for that. If I were to ask you to raise your hand, how many of y'all have stole from your parents? A lot of sheepish grins and smiles all over the place. I stole from my parents. Okay. Now I'm not trying to be like a super spiritual. Yes, I stole money from my parents. Dad would come home to take a nap. You know, it was very hot in the daytime, and he would hang his pants. And there was this one day, man, I was like, I need some money. And there was his wallet, and some money was sticking out. And I plucked out that one. I don't even know how much it was, but it bought me a lot of candy. And that evening, the dining table, dad had a different personality where back in the day, he would have really dealt with me, but somehow he knew how to do it. He simply asked me, so how did everything go today? He never asked that kind of question. So I was like, I was like, oh, I would love to tell you that I never stole again. Not true. It's amazing how parents even have anything left after some of us. We rob them day in, day out. And then we come from a high place of, what do you call that? A moral superiority, and talk about how terrible parents, you stole from them. They should have turned you in a long time ago. Have humility, amen. He stole, but that's not the worst thing. Maybe through a sudden burst of conscience, or maybe his mother, like our moms have done at times, she whispered, just curse on that money, son. He's like, or maybe through fear, he comes to his mother and says, I messed up. Here's the money. But his mother's response is, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my son." We're not talking about stealing a few bucks. We're not talking about just stealing a few $100s. That's a big amount of money. There should have been consequences. And what is mom doing here? It's all good. You confessed, and that's all matters. That's not what God said in his word. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 6 and verse 5, after many things that are listed as stealing, listen to what God said, Leviticus 6:5, for or all that about which he has sworn falsely, he shall restore its full value, add 1/5 more to it. There was no consequence here. Bless you, my son. God bless you. It's all done. I want to say a word to parents this morning. When you rescue your children, even after they do wrong, be careful because you are reinforcing the wrong morals in their lives. And I'm saying that as a parent who's done that. I'm saying that as a former teacher, as a former principal. I've seen parents who may be horrible in their lifestyle, and yet when it comes to the children, they will defend them to death. Don't think you're doing them a favor. You're actually reinforcing behaviors that's going to become very costly for them down the road. What this mom is doing is what moms do. She's thinking, if I just bless him, the curse will be reversed. But that's not how it works. You see, the bottom line here is something is terribly wrong, because now it gets worse. Listen to verse 3 in Judges 17. So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a carved image and a molded image. Now, therefore, I will return it to you. This mom is like the win-win situation kind of person. Hey, we had a bad thing happen, but let me tell you what, we can make this work. We can find something good out of this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this money and we're going to give it to the Lord. Why? Because it's cursed. Now, in today's world, we don't think about money as cursed, right? I mean, you can say whatever you want to, money is money. But in those days, when you pronounce that curse, it cannot be used in a good way. What she's saying here is this: I'm going to give it to the Lord. Now, many of us are thinking, man, nothing wrong with that. Satan had it long enough. Give it to God. No, something terribly wrong with that. She was giving what was cursed to God. As I said in the opening of this message today, many times people give the blind, the lame, the leftover to God. We give to God what doesn't cost us anything. Or if it does cost us, it's just piddly. The cursed. Do you give your tithes and your offerings to God? Don't worry about how the church can pay its bills or we're building a building. God taking care of us, we're fine. That part I'm not concerned about. I'm concerned about you because you have been robbing from God. You're giving the leftover to God. When God says, give me the 10%, God could have said 90%. For years and years and years, you have been stealing from God. You're giving God the leftover. How about your personal life, your strength? You're going to give your time, your energy to everything else, the leftover. Frankly, many of y'all don't even do that. You don't even give your leftover strength. There's not a single place at this church that you even serve. Think about that for a moment. You see, what these people were doing here, what this woman was doing here, is she was giving this leftover curse to God. So listen to verse 4. Then he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver, gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image, a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. the man Micah had a shrine. He's like, mom made good of a bad situation. I can do that too. I'm going to build a little temple in my house with the same money, not using the money they had, the leftover, the cursed. And so he made an ephod and household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. This is the tribe of Ephraim. The priests were supposed to come only from the tribe of Levite, and even there, only the descendants of Aaron. What business does this man have to make a priest? Now, today, all of us are priests before God. Through Jesus Christ, we're all priests. It's the priesthood of believers. But at that time, that wasn't the case. But you see, they're shifting and they are moving away from the faith and they're creating their own faith. You know, when you go down this direction, just know that Satan will open many doors for you. Sometimes people think that God is the only one who opens doors. No, Satan will open doors for you. Listen to what happens here in Judges 17 and verse 7. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite. Uh-oh, I must be doing something right, because there's a Levite about to come to my home. This man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Does anybody know someone who also came from Bethlehem? Jesus. But keep in mind, this Levite is a false type. So he meanders his way, shows up at Micah's home, and he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah." Maybe at that time, we don't know for sure, because the prophecy about Jesus being born in Bethlehem is in Micah, the different Micah that came much later. But I think it may have already been out there that one day God's son was going to come through the city of Bethlehem. So this Micah is thinking, bingo, I can change the future. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hire this Levite who providentially comes from the city of Bethlehem, which is the city from which God's king is going to come. Hey, it's a win-win situation. We can really make good of a bad situation. And so Micah said to him, he said, I am from here, there. He said to him in verse 10, "Dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year." Anybody remember how much he stole from his mom? 1,100 shekels. And he's going to give this priest, this false priest, only 10 per year. I mean, they're all stealing from each other. It's kind of interesting. What is the Levite's response? So the Levite went in. He took the job. In verse 11, the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons. He gave himself over to Micah. But he is a false type of Christ. You know what the Bible says about Jesus in John chapter 2? In verse 24, "But Jesus did not commit himself to them, because he knew all men and had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in man." The Levite was willing to fit into Micah's program. Jesus was not willing to fit into anyone's program. He had his own program. You see, you and I cannot fit Jesus into our program. We have to fit into his. Here's the evidence that this Levite was a false type. But it goes further. Listen to verse 12. So Micah, this man, consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. And his response is, Now I know that the Lord will be good to me since I have a Levite as priest. I got it made, man. I am a winner. I got me a Levite. God has to bless me. You see, what Micah was doing is what many of us do, is that we make worship. We have a worship of our own making. This is how we're going to worship God. This is how it's going to be. What is worse than a life of sin and rebellion against God is trying to worship God in our own way. We only like to offer God what is convenient, but God wants the heart. God wants true and complete surrender. When we see a little breakthrough, a little window, a little door open, two things line up and we say, bingo, God must be in it. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. No, all sin doesn't work together for good. Stop quoting Romans 8:28, because Satan can also line things up. But it's about to get worse. Listen to Judges chapter 18 and verse 1. Remember the tribe of Dan? I mean, these are the Ephraimites. The tribe of Dan about this time is trying to move to the north. They don't want to do what God told them to do. God told them, take this land to the southwest. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. They're too difficult to fight. We're going to go north. We're going to find our own land. And so they embarked on a strategy. And so if you listen to Judges 18 and verse 2, so the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. Who does that remind you of? Moses. Who does that remind you of? Joshua. So they are copying the pattern. Before you take the land, spy out the land. Okay, let's do the same. But the land is not there. The land is down here. Yeah, but we're not going to go over there. But we're going to do things just the way Moses did it. We're going to do things just the way Joshua did it. But you're going in the wrong direction. Shh. It's all right. God's going to bless it all. As long as we do the right things, God's going to bless it all. Doesn't matter which direction we go. And so these 5 spies came through this part of the country, and guess what? They come to the home of Micah, and they said, they heard his voice. See, Micah was not from there. He was a Levite, so he had a different accent. And they heard his accent, and so they come into the house, and they asked him in Judges 18, verse 3, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here? And Micah said, hey, look, this man, this Levite said, this man Micah hired me and I have become his priest. Now I find this very ironic and humorous. So they said to him, please inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous. That's the point you want to shout and say, he is a false priest. He is going to give you false advice. What are you doing? And yet these 5 spies are asking this man who has no business being a priest to give them blessing on their journey. And he even kind of prophetically says, God is watching over you. What he's really saying is God got his eye on you. He doesn't even know he's saying that. By the way, be very careful about getting blessing from people who are not walking with God. You know, you're having this relationship over here, or you're doing bad behavior. You will always find people, and sometimes you even find adults who hold a Bible in their hands and who will pronounce blessing on that. Honey, let me just tell you, God loves you, and it's all good. They're no different than that young Levite who had no business being a priest. Because Satan will always bring people into your lives who will pronounce a false blessing. As a pastor of this church, my goal here is not to stand here and please you. Now, I love you and I want to be encouraging to you, but I want to speak the truth to you. Are y'all getting that? I'm not a hired gun. I'm here to preach the word. And sometimes when you hear the word, it's unnerving, it's jarring, it's frustrating, and it's like, he's talking to me. I hope it is talking to you. I hope it's waking you up because you are headed in the wrong direction. And so these 5 men, they go to the north and they see a place called Laish. You remember the Tel Dan? Tel Dan was known as Laish. And these people were not on God's hit list. They were not Canaanites. They were not collaborating with the Canaanites. They were a peaceful, secure people. They were living there because God had given them the land. And these people come up there and they have this false sense of confidence. Hey, that priest back there blessed us, so this must be right. And they go back down to their tribe and say, all right, let's go. We have God's blessing. We can take those people to the north. And 600 armed men from the Danites showed up. And they're making their way. And guess what? They also stop at Micah's home. I mean, this just gets worse and worse. And they come to Micah's home and listen to Judges 17, verse 18. And they went into Micah's house and they took the carved image. I mean, this whole thing started because a mother, in her moment of joy, decided to give this cursed money to God. And that's how all this has happened. So they come and take this carved image, the ephod, what the priest used to wear with the Urim and the Thummim, the household idols, and the molded image, and the priest, the young Levite from Bethlehem, he has a little bit of backbone. He says, what are you doing? I love their response. Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? I can imagine the young Levite is like, man, every time I buy a lottery ticket, I win. I was just wandering and they gave me a job. Now I am a priest and the people come looking for blessings from me. And now an entire tribe wants to make me their bishop. God must be in this. By the way, when you see those doors open one after the other, doesn't always mean that God's opening those doors. Listen to his response. Verse 20. So the priest's heart was glad and he took the ephod. He's like, let me help you. He took the ephod, the household idols. I mean, these are thieves robbing thieves. And he took his place among the people. What happens next in verse 27? Now they have a priest with them. Who can ever stop them? Now some preacher or some Bible teacher or somebody has told you that what you're doing and the lifestyle you're living and the way you're behaving is good. With all that motivation, the Danites, in verse 27, they went to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them. They began to kill people who were not on God's target. These were soft targets. And they burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon and they had no ties with anyone. Remember what I said? God never condemns Samson. He never condemns Gideon. He never condemns Barak. But here he is condemning. He's like, these people didn't do anything wrong. They had no one to protect them. They had no ties with anybody. And the Danites came in and they killed innocent people. That's why sometimes people think that God is just, in the Old Testament, just kill everybody who's not Israel. That's not true. There were limits. There were people who were in God's land and there were people who were fine. Leave them alone. Do not touch them. In fact, many times when Moses was coming with the people of Israel going around through the wilderness, he said, don't take their land, don't take their land, don't take their land. This is not just a book about unchecked violence. And here's what they do now. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and dwelt there, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father. Remember the 12 tribes? One of them was Dan. They're like, let's name hence Tel Dan. Tel is the hill of Dan. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Let me say a quick word here before we come to the close of this message. Today's message is grim, but I hope it will be a breakthrough for some of you because you're expecting God to bless something when God is saying you need to repent, you need to go back south and take the land that I told you to take. You're trying to go after soft targets. You're trying to go after, I just need to pray more. No, your sin is envy. I just need to read the Bible more. No, your sin is anger. I just need to help out in church more. No, your sin is pornography. Let's start going after the hard targets. What we're doing here is we're harboring sin that God has called sin, and we're dealing with things like the Laishites. And God says, no, I told you to go after the Amorites. Samson did. You're not. But here it gets very interesting. Listen to verse 30. Judges 18, verse 30. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves a carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Finally, we get the name of the Levite. What is his name? Jonathan. But it gives us some more information. Do you see that information? The son of Gershom, the son of, what does it say? It's not Manasseh. It's Moses. He said, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? There is a textual corruption there. Manasseh, Moshe. It was Moshe, but some scribe was so embarrassed that this was one of Moses' great grandson who led the Danites into such a heinous sin against God that he put a dangling noon. Noon is a Hebrew letter like N, and he put it in such a way that it became Manasseh. This is not Manasseh. He's from the tribe of Levites, not Manasseh. And if you go to Exodus chapter 2, it gives us the name of Moses' son, Gershom. You know why we do things at Clearview? And I hope your children love basketball, and I hope they play basketball, and I hope they hit the big time and send some money to Clearview. Okay, I hope they will do that. The chances are, it's physiological. I mean, they have it or they don't. Our hope is that they will come to know Jesus Christ. Our hope is that your grandchildren will follow Jesus Christ. Can you imagine Moses in heaven looking down and saying, that's my great grandson who's leading God's people astray? He was never supposed to be a priest. It was Moses and Aaron, both from the tribe of the Levites, but it was Aaron's children who were supposed to be priests before God, not Moses's. And yet somebody convinced this young man, you can change worship. You can make church whatever you want it to be. You can decide morality if it's right for you. If you convince yourself hard enough, then it's the truth. Help your children more than playing basketball and baseball and football and soccer. Teach them to have a vital relationship with Jesus Christ. They will thank you a whole lot more than anything else. Teach them to know Jesus Christ. The old adage is still true. We don't wear coattails, but you have a lot of people who are hanging on to the shirt tails of their parents because granddaddy was a pastor or grandma was a woman of faith and prayer. That means nothing. You individually need a relationship with Jesus Christ. This young man was Moses' great, 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 great grandson and involved in such debased idolatry. In closing, I want us to turn to the final book in the Bible. Can you turn there for a moment and we'll close with that? Book of Revelation, chapter 7. Final book, easy to find, chapter 7 and verse 4. We're going to be doing a series on prophecy in the new year. And I have already been doing things helping you have a foretaste, kind of whetting your appetite for what's coming. But let's read Revelation chapter 7 and verse 4. And I heard the number of those who were sealed. Who are these who are sealed? These are the people of Israel. Remember that the tribes to the north are gone. And one day God's going to bring them back. Ethnic Israel will come back because God knows who they are. In his timing, he will bring them back. And these 144,000 will be like the Apostle Paul, the evangelist. They will be like Peter on the day of Pentecost. They will be like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They will be like Esther, who went before the king. Powerful people witnessing for Jesus Christ. But listen to how they're described. 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. There is a tribe missing. Which one is it? The tribe of Dan. They crossed the line. Even though God, in his divine sovereignty and providence, brought all of them back, no matter how sinful they were, he brought them back. He never brought the tribe of Dan back because they committed such a heinous sin against God. See, it's not just a sin of atheism, it's a sin of antheism, where we say, God is not only you, but we're also going to have this other things. We're never going to give you our whole heart and our whole soul and our whole body and our purse and everything. We're just going to give you this, but we're also going to share it other places. We're going to have a play here next weekend. If you didn't get the tickets, please get the tickets. It's Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. It's a phenomenal play. We're going to share the gospel through it. It's just amazing. But Shakespeare once said, "Take but degree away, untune that string, and hark what discord follows." You don't have to completely walk away from God, but all it requires is a 1-degree shift. All it requires is one string untuned. And way down the road, you hear such discord that even Moses' grandson was not immune to apostasy. There are many applications this morning. There's applications as how are you leading your children? And you say, well, I tell them to love God. You have to model it for them. The best gift you and I can give to our children is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Do your children know God? Do your grandchildren have a relationship with Christ? How about your worship? Is it God and something else? I hope this morning's message has opened your eyes that God will not receive it. I don't know where you are this morning. Maybe God's Holy Spirit has pointed out that hard target in your life. Oh, you will handle this petty sin over here. But the hard target, that's what God wants you to deal. The Christian life is a battle. You got envy in your heart? I mean, that's your sin. You can't cover that up by serving people. You have to deal with envy. Envy says, you got something that I really want, and I hate you for that, or I will do whatever I can to get it. That's envy. And if you say, well, over here, I just need to do more. No. God wants you to take care of the hard target. I don't know where God is speaking to your hearts, but I hope this morning you'll be like Samson. You will go against the flow. As everybody's making their way to the north, the lone guy gets up and goes, and everybody's misunderstanding who he is. He's like, God told us to go down there. Come up here, Samson. You can help us defeat those people in Laish. It's like, no, those are the people. Some of you need to change direction. Where is God speaking to your heart? And don't give God the leftover. Give him the best. Stop robbing God.